Hello and welcome to On the Kerbs Pub Chat. I'm your host, Thiemo Daily, and joining me this week are On the Kerbs Pub Chat co-hosts slash regulars Jacob Phillips and Öykü Ceylan. How are you both?
Good. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. How is Jacob?
I am doing very well, Thiemo. It's great to be back at the pub I know and love. It's been a while, actually, since I've been here, but I'm sure that everyone will remember my regular order.
Yes, and like you say, it's been a little while since the three of us been together, never mind just two of us on one of these, so don't question question the fact rather that at the time of recording it's Saturday morning and we're not going to look into why that's the time to go to the pub. Just go with us, we need it. Anyway, we've got the band back together to tackle one of the bigger topics available to us, which is women in motorsport. And we are very aware that this is a massive area to cover, something that I was reminded of earlier this year when chatting with Lakeside Drive and extremely off-track podcast host Freya Brolsma for On the Kerbs, the normal podcast. But with a lot happening in this realm right now, we kind of wanted to chat about the latest developments, give our takes, and promote a bit of a discussion about it. And all three of us have something we want to talk about with each other. So we'll go through these first and then address some of the questions and comments submitted to us by you, the listener. But Öykü, we're going to kick things off with you. So why don't you lead us into the area of conversation you want to kick us things off with?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me take the lead. So I just want to go straight into it by talking about the podiums that we had this season. So with the season being just wrapped, we haven't got a single woman on any podium this year. And I don't have the words to explain how disappointed I am, actually. Since 2019, we had some awesome moments with women on the podium consistently, but 2023 was a total letdown, despite over 155, I think, women working hard behind the scenes. None got celebrated during the podium ceremonies. And out of the 22, Red Bull had 21 chances to give back to the women who are working really hard in their teams, and they just didn't. They completely missed that chance. And I don't know. It's the gap between F1's inclusivity talk and what they actually do is not cool, I feel like. What do you guys think?
This was, for me, one of the most disappointing moments of the season, actually. And I didn't fully sort of realise it at the time. I think I saw it on Twitter after Abu Dhabi. And I thought, this surely can't be. You had to sort of think back through the race and think, was there a moment that the woman was on the podium? And then I thought, no, there absolutely wasn't. And Red Bull winning 21 of the 22 times we hear national anthems on the podium, and in their team, which I'm going to come on to a little bit later, a little sneak preview podcast, but their strategist, Hannah Schmidt, who plays an absolutely key role within Red Bull's success, didn't appear on the podium once, but a very mechanics, PR personnel, I think Christian at times maybe, but it was a real chance to even a couple of times you would have thought Hannah Schmidt or one of the other fabulous women behind the scenes at Red Bull would have got onto the podium, and it's a real shame that they didn't, and a real dropped ball, which we're looking forward to. Their whole race is one thing which has been going now I think for 3 or 4 years, and the whole net the 2030 goals that they have, and it really just doesn't marry up with that. So Red Bull, I suppose we have to look at you because no one else got the chance, and you'd like to think that the other teams would have put a female there if they'd won a race. I mean, Ferrari only won one, so okay, I suppose we can let them off there. But so if Red Bull keep dominating next season, which there's a fair chance they might, you'd hope to see a few of their fabulous women up on the podium. So yeah, very disappointing on my behalf there.
Going what you said, really, I think with Red Bull winning so much, they'd at least put 1 or 2 women up there, particularly as you say, Jacob, they've got Hannah Schmidt up there working for them. So she's been responsible for a lot of the strategic success that they've had. So it's very odd that it's not been done. And like you say, when you saw the statistic after Abu Dhabi, you're like, that can't be right, surely. And then you think back, and because a lot of us were so focused at the time of, let's just get through this damn race weekend, nothing's happening, you kind of forget to focus on these sorts of things. And then afterwards, like, oh, well, that's not good at all. How did we not notice this sooner? Or was kind of just optimism that it was going to happen later in the season, and then it just never panned out? And I think for next year, regardless of Red Bull domination or not, when Oscar Piastri wins a Grand Prix, I want his mum up on the podium with him. I want that to be one of the women who we see up there next year, because that is just good content for everyone involved there. And I think as well, others generally don't get a lot of attention for the F1 drivers that they produce. And you see that with Verstappen as well. You hear a lot of the time. Eddie Jordan said the other day that he always thought that his mum was quicker than Joss was. So it's like, but you never see her getting any kind of credit for anything. So I think that could be a fun way to twist that up a bit. Baroka, you had another little topic that you wanted to chat about with regards to not just women on the podium, but with terms of PR and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think the problem here is that it's starting to feel like F1 is using gender equality and diversity as a marketing tool, like just for clout and PR purposes, because the disconnect between the sport's claims and what they say they want to do and what they actually do, like the difference is very stark and it's very upsetting. It's not just about checking these boxes, it's about genuinely celebrating and recognizing the contributions of all these amazing women. And they don't do that. And when you lose this genuine feeling, I think whatever you do, it doesn't matter anymore. Let's say we have women on every podium next season. I don't care at this point because we had to ask for it. Like, you missed the chance already. So I don't know. I think it feels more and more like a PR project, and just don't do it then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's that balance that you can have with that where it's obviously you can utilize PR very well for it, but you want it to feel genuine. At least if they are doing it for that purpose, you at least want them to tell a good story with it and for it to feel natural, even if it's not, because I think that's the next best thing, kind of, is that with all of these things, you want it to feel natural. You don't want it to feel forced. It needs to be organic. But if it's not going to be, then the least you could do, I mean, you've got enough money to pay the right people and experts in these respective areas to at least tell the story to them and make it feel like that. So everyone's like, it might be, but I might actually believe that at the same time. And you kind of, if you're doubting it a little bit, but you're not 100% doubting it, then you can maybe get away with it. Which again, hate that we have to advocate for that. But if that's the bare minimum, how would you not be able to get away with that? You've got an army of people at your disposal if you want. There's plenty of people out there who would love to have that chance to try and spin that in some way. And again, say we're trying to give you as many open goals here as we can. And Christ, you know.
Yeah, F1 at the moment just seem to like missing open goals, which is a real shame. But yeah, one thing I'd like to add to that really quickly is I was looking through some articles actually just recently, just sort of checking, well, what's the comparison between talking about, males, Hannah Schmidt as an example again, and then Pete Bonington, for example. Obviously, we know who's done fabulous work with Mercedes and Hamilton, sort of on the strategy team. I think I only found 3 articles in the last 3 years about Hannah Schmidt saying, talking about her successes, but I found various podcasts, interviews with Sky, interviews with F1 TV, Autosport, on various podcasts where Pete Bonington appeared. And I just thought, well, and there was articles sort of every month about it. So, they both do very similar roles. Red Bull have arguably obviously been more successful in the last 2 years when I was looking through these articles. And it's just the real disparity between how we talk about these people. It's a real shame for me that these people, and there obviously are many other more as well. Obviously, we had Bernie Collins, who worked with Aston Martin, and Ruth Buscombe, I think, who still works with Alfa Romeo, maybe Haas now. Mm-hmm. But we just don't see them or hear of them very often. And I think that F1 itself have, like you said, guys have had real issues in sort of matching up their goals with what they actually do. I think the media, Sky included to some extent, but I'll give them a little bit of praise in a minute, which is rare for me. But certainly for people like Autosport, race fans, all of these other people who produce content online and for newspapers and stuff, really don't seem to be sort of giving it an equal footing.
No, I agree with that, and it also leads quite nicely into a segue of representation of women on TV that you want to talk about as well, Jacob. So I'm going to keep it with you.
Yes, staying with me. I've given Sky quite a bit of criticism actually over the past 2 to 3 years. I think their programming is, let themselves down, but that's a different point for another PUBG episode. But I think Sky have always been very good in actually representing females on TV, and this is moving on to a slightly positive point. I think since Sky's inception in 2012, we've always had at least 2 or 3 females on the screen. We've had Natalie Pinkham, who's been there I think since day one. We had Georgie Thompson, who was the original presenter in the first year, who moved on to other things afterwards. But then we had Rachel Brooks come in. We've now had Danica Patrick. We've had Naomi Schiff, who I think has been one of the best additions to Sky in in maybe their F1 history. I think she's amazing. We've got Bernie Collins on there now. I think we had a couple of others as well that I'm probably forgetting. But I do think that element is certainly improving, which is good. I think that shows, prosperity in that front. And I was speaking to Laura Winter 3 years ago, actually, who's now on F1 TV. Obviously, we can't see that here in the UK, but certainly on the continent, I know she's doing fantastic things. And she always said to me, the one thing that is very, very crucial in this is if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think from that aspect alone, and F1 and the actual on-track action has to improve. But I think from the television perspective and the broadcasting element, we are seeing these opportunities for females. Obviously, the F1 Kids has been a mission that included some great talent on there as well. So I think there are opportunities in the broadcasting front, and I have to give Sky some credit. But if that could, link up with the actual on-track action, I think the F1 world as a whole would be a much better place.
It's also worth noting as well, I think, from the British perspective that we've got to use it while we've got it, is that Channel 4 have also done a pretty good job of that as well over the years. I mean, Lee Mackenzie's been ITV, BBC and Channel 4 throughout all of the different iterations of that coverage, and then Alice Powell's been on there semi-frequently. Jamie Chadwick's been on there, and she's been on Sky. That might have been one of the people you were thinking of there, Jacob. And then I think this year and last, Ariana Bravo has been on there. And they're kind of on loan-ish from F1 TV, but it's nice that they get another platform at least to hone their skills, because I think it's like getting seat time in the cars. There's not much of it, and it's kind of, you've got to make the most of it while you can. So if you get these little opportunities here and there, then you've got to make the most of them, and you got to give Channel 4 and Sky that bit of credit for at least giving them the opportunity to do it, and it's kind of up to them if they sink or swim them. But that's all you kind of really want at the end of the day. It's just, you're not saying shoehorn these people in here for the sake of it, like we were saying earlier. Give them the opportunity, and then it's up to them. It's the same thing with it should be with drivers. If you're crap in the car, why should I keep you there? Maybe we should all channel our inner helmet market a little bit more and just be very brutal about it. But that's the only time I'm going to say that. But yeah, it's an interesting one. What do you think, Öykü?
Yeah, I think when we talk about female F1 presenters, one name that deserves to be brought up is Lizzie McIntosh. And she has been doing some incredible work, but Thiemo knows, when I first discovered her and started consuming her content, I didn't really get that hype around her. Like, the spice didn't hit me as it did with everyone else, I feel like. But now that I've been following her for a while, I started to see what it is. Like, how we talk about why we don't have more women racing drivers, and the main thing is you have to raise them to race. I think what Lizzie does is she's aiming at a very younger generation, like not me, not you guys. Her followers are...
You're calling us old?
Yeah, obviously.
We're not that old. I know we're drinking ale in this pub, but we're not that
old enough to hit the pub at least. So it's all good. But like, really, people around maybe 13, 14, and these little girls looking up to her, wanting to be like her. And I think what she does really matters, because when you talk about Sky as well, I know that they're now doing the kids broadcast thing, which I think is really cute. But Sky is aimed at people more our generation, even older. But what Lizzie and some other content creators and some presenters are doing is, I think, very unique in their own way. That's just nice.
No, that's true, and I think you do have to cater for those different audiences. I mean, good luck trying to get any of the three of us to watch Sky Kids at any point in the future. I mean, the only good thing I think that's come of that is watching the one kid calling Nico Brittany and really pissing him off. That was great TV. But
and the fact we don't have to listen to David Croft.
Well, yeah, okay, two okay, maybe you will start watching Sky Kids. I don't know. We'll see how bad it gets. But yeah, it's good that you can at least cater for those audiences. And like you say, whilst it may not always be our cup of tea, or we'll understand what the appeal is, as long as there is an appeal to some group that is not even necessarily big enough, but as long as it's something that's catered towards, then it's hopefully pushing things in the right direction there. And I mean, you touched on the fact that you need to raise women to be racers, and it's kind of, we're seeing more and more of that now. That does kind of lead Jacob into his next point on when the hell do we see a female F1 driver again?
This is something that's always very interesting me, and going back to a previous point I made about Laura Winter, I was asking her a few years ago as part of my project for my master's, I looked into female motorsport and inclusivity on many fronts. In the E and other things, W series at the time, of course. And I asked her what time, and I asked many people actually. One of the questions, sort of in my responses, when we see a Formula One driver, a female Formula One driver, and a lot of people said this is before the pandemic. So I think this is January 2020. I think that some people said, by 2026, 27, we'd have a female Formula One driver. Someone said 2030. Some said by 2023. Obviously, we're in the end of 2023, not 24 next season. But to be honest, it saddens me to say, but I can't see when we are going to 2024 next year. And then is there a hope for 26 maybe, with Andretti potentially coming onto the grid? Maybe we could look at Chadwick there potentially, who knows? But going forward, being honest, I don't really see when we're going to get in or what's going to lead to that change. The feeder series will obviously help with that, and that will bring me on to another point I'll make in a minute. But I was interested to know when, honestly, guys, do you think that we will do? Because I can't see one before at this stage by 2030, and that might be quite negative. But feel free to differ to what I think there.
I was going to say, in theory, it should be before 2030, but at the same time, you look at Sophia Flörsch, you look at Jamie Chadwick, Marta Garcia, the Alcobaces, and Bianca Bustamante, kind of the most recognisable figures in that space, I'd want to say. And you think, surely, at the very bare minimum least, get them in a practice session. Because, Sophia's with Alpine, Jamie's with Williams, Bianca's with McLaren, Marta and the Alcobaces, they shouldn't need much encouragement to be able to get a link with an F1 team. And if Roy bloody Nissani can get multiple FP1 sessions over multiple years, then I don't see why any of these can't have that. And as nice as driving old F1 cars in the Gulf Historic or at Goodwood is lovely, and keep doing that as well, put them in a modern F1 car and just see what happens. Do kind of what Aston Martin did with Jess Hawkins, but make it this year's car rather than a couple of years ago. That was a good step in the right direction, but I also don't see her getting into F1, unfortunately. I'd like it, as long as she got there on merit, but I just don't see it. And these people are like, well, Sophia Flörsch, Formula 3 points on the board for PHM, their first points, more points than all of the drivers in F2 combined. Jamie Chadwick, 3-time W Series champion, doing well in Indy Next. Marta Garcia, one F1 Academy. Alcobaces, they're just bloody fast. And Bianca, there's so much there on and off track. So it's like, what more do you want as an F1 team to at least give her the chance? And if we go back to the PR and clout that we were talking about earlier, at the very least, it would make for very good of that and would help you tick your boxes and get you at least some favourable stuff on that side of things. So I don't know if it will happen before 2030. I want it to, and there isn't really excuse for it not to, as long as because again, you think Sophia Flörsch, I'm still going to go into bat for her again, because it still annoys me that she won't probably be in F2 next year, and there probably won't be any women there. And that's just frustrating when you see some of the drivers that are, because while money's always been a factor, it makes talent now feel like a secondary requirement. And she deserves a spot in F2, at least in the same team, because she scored more points than any of their drivers from F2 last year. And from there, we've seen people who, what's the diplomatic way of putting it? Sorry, they don't deserve to be in Formula One, getting into Formula One. So at least if we're going to be a little bit topsy-turvy, then just get on with it. Yeah. And at the same time, gives her a new challenge. And if she can't do it, then she can't do it. Yeah, well, it probably won't last too long.
Well, and that's the thing, isn't it? If we don't see it, we won't find out. So that's the thing, we need to find out. We need to give these give them practice sessions at very, very least, which we just haven't done. And with F1's move to giving drivers more practice sessions, obviously now they have to have at least 2. We saw Abu Dhabi. We've seen with Kota, for example. There are these chances. So F1 teams, do better.
Preach.
Yeah, a couple of the little points you wanted to make there. All right, I went off on one, Jacob, though, so I'll let things go back to you for a second.
It's not like you to go off on one.
It's usually your job.
Did we ask you? You haven't answered yet. When do you reckon we'll see a female F1 driver?
I don't know how I ended up being the pessimist one. among this three, but
Oh my
2030
word.
doesn't feel realistic at all. I mean, we're going to see practice sessions, sure, but actually being like having one of the seats in an F1 team, earliest like 35 or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but
The pessimists become the optimists. Yeah. Can you believe it, Thiemo?
I can, only because the sad thing is she's probably right, and that's annoying.
Yeah, we're kidding ourselves.
We're optimistic about one thing. This is all we've got left at this point, Jacob. Everyone's taken everything else from us this year, so we're just desperately hanging on to this.
It's taken a lot from us, taken more than enough from us this season.
Yeah.
Hence pub on a Saturday morning. Anyway.
Well, on that note, 2035 is an absolute edgeware, and that saddens me to say. But, it brings me to my next point, really, which F1 has a massive role to play. Obviously, it's the leader in world motorsport. It's the one that's most watched, has the most PR, the most following, the most money, X, Y, and Z. But a change, I think, needs to happen, certainly within the teams lower down the rankings. And Thiemo, you already touched on there that Sophia Flörsch, not confirmed for next year, but pretty likely to be back in F3. No seat for her in F2. Absolute shame. And PHM could do with someone who can score points, because last year they did absolutely rubbish in Formula 2, scoring no points. But
so we said it was impressive on a whole other level, but in a championship where it's equal machinery with sprint races and reverse grids, you still managed to be 47 points off your nearest rival in last. So it's impressive, but Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, you'd need a bleep machine on this podcast to describe PHM's season if I was to rant about it. But
I'll get my money back on that quite quickly, I think.
Yeah, good in return on investment there. But I think that we're seeing, certainly with F2, Sophia Flörsch on that performance at very least could go up to someone like PHM, but they've signed someone who I had never heard of before, and no disrespect to him. I had to look on Wikipedia and find out what he'd done. But Paraguayan Josh Dirksen, I think, signed for PHM. And who knows, he could be a very good driver. I'm not judging him on his talents there, but surely you've got to promote from F3 first. He's coming in from Frecker, where he did finish 16th last year. And if I'm, being less diplomatic about it, there are much better drivers for that role than Josh. And why not someone like Sophia? I think that's quite sad that we won't see her into ranks. I know that Kimi Antonelli's risen from Frecker all the way to F2, so it can be done. Although I'd like them to go through the more traditional channels of F3 than F2 up the rungs of the ladder. But if these females don't move up the ladder and no one provides them the funding, then we're never going to see it, because I don't think anyone's going to promote anyone from F3 straight to F1 or something like that, for example. So, and that's where F1 Academy needs to play a role as well. Touching on that, F1 Academy, I think, by and large, very, very thing. I had slight criticisms of it last year in the way it was run, and the fact that, yes, it was great, the average championship was being talked about on social media, but it missed a massive open goal last year, and the fact that it wasn't shown on TV, which was a massive shame for me, considering W Series was, and W Series, gained some traction, certainly through the years. Jamie Chadwick there as its three-time champion sort of gained some traction on TV, online, and things like that. But the fact we went from seeing, all female races every weekend supporting F1, and they did a standalone series as well. The fact that we didn't see any of it really, that really saddened me. And Thiemo, I know you were at the Le Castellet round, and the fact that you had to find out I love timing didn't really sit well with me too well.
No, it was kind of curious being there, because you'd think at least the teams would be able to watch the race live as it's going on, as the cameras were all up there filming for the highlight show anyway. So the fact that they only had the live timing screens, and if I wanted to watch it, I had to go up on the bloody roof, was just silly. But, I mean, good job it was south of France in late July, so the weather's going to be great for it. But that's not really the point. And again, you can only see part of the track anyway. So it was short of climbing onto the back of one of the cars and hoping they don't notice that I've done that. I'm not going to be able to see the racing as it's playing out properly from lap to lap. And it was kind of only after the races where you're just sneakily going in behind the driver to watch their onboard footage back with them, as they're learning where they can improve for the next race, that you were starting to see, oh, is that what happened there? Had no idea. That explains that lap time. But, like you say, massive own goal there, and just... hopefully
Not
something that
great.
gets course corrected next year, because again, you'd think if you don't learn from it next year, then what the hell are you doing?
Yeah. But on a positive note, I love how F1 Academy is named F1 Academy, because there is purpose in the name. When you hear it, you understand what it stands for. That is an academy for drivers who want to make it to Formula One, like just simple. I love how you understand that this is not imprisonment for women racing drivers. Like, it is not an attempt to make the sport gender segregated. And I feel like this clarity is something that we lacked before. Like, when I look at W series, do we even know what W stands for? Was it ever explicitly
I
stated,
think
or
it was
are
meant
we
to
just...
be women's series, wasn't it, Jacob?
Yeah, right, obviously. But then
Yeah,
why
it
would you
was
name
women's.
woman series? It hints at segregation, I feel like. And
Well, yeah,
I
I
also
think that was
thought
the
that it was
thing with that though, was
flawed.
that there was a lot of criticism about it when it first came about because of the segregation nature, and I think everyone in WC was like, "Yeah, no, don't get me wrong, we get that. We don't want to have to segregate
Yeah.
either, but you're not giving us the bloody chance to get in the seats with everyone else, so we have to find a way around it." And ideally, with W Series and then with F1 Academy, they don't
Mm.
last forever because we won't need them in however many years, because it will just filter naturally into the greater things, and it will just all be on, again, maybe being too idealistic, optimistic on my idea, but it will all be on actual talent. I mean, it's a radical idea that I know that people will struggle to get their heads around, but that's what I'd like to see from it in the future. So I get your point, but I think it's kind of, you've got to play the game a little bit, and if you've got to you've got to play some cards that you wouldn't ordinarily want to, then that's just what it is, unfortunately, and you kind of got to blame the system for it rather than the people who are trying to game it.
Yeah, I think in
Yeah.
an ideal world, F1 Academy wouldn't exist because you would have the opportunity for women in Formula One, in Formula Two, and Formula Three. But for the time being, I think it's a very necessary and good thing that we do have it until, hopefully in 10 years' time, that ideally we wouldn't need it. But we'll see what
I'm
happens.
definitely going to clip you at the start there with what you're saying about it, and we're going to use that to promote the podcast. Just like Jacob said this. Oh my God.
Oh my
Run with
God.
it.
But yeah, I think as well, looking at other motorsport series, there is a blueprint for how it can be done, and quite naturally as well, especially if you're starting something from scratch and even incorporating into the already long established series. The two kind of examples I've got there is Extreme E in terms of what to do if you've got a brand new series. It just automatically from the get go was, this is one of the rules. You have one male driver and one female driver. That's it. They're like, okay, everyone's accepted it. And you're like, yeah, cool. I mean, obviously, you have some people who don't, but they're like, oh, it's whatever nonsense that they're spouting. But it's like, no, this is how you do it naturally. If you don't want to segregate it, this is how you do it. And it's worked out really well because you've seen drivers from all over the place that you may not have heard of, and from completely different disciplines, because Extremely is that mixture of drivers from track racing to off-road to anything and everything in between. So it's been good fun on that one, and perhaps shows any new series there's a good starting point. I mean, you look at the Indian Racing League, it's still trying to find its feet in a lot of ways, but one of the things they did is make sure they have a female driver in every team. There's still like 2 or 3 blokes for every one woman, but it's at least a step in the right direction, and you can say that at least they're trying and they're doing something. So it's, and you kind of think, if that wasn't for Extremely, would that be there now? And I think with IndyCar, IMSA, and rallying, they showcase the next step, because you do have a lot of women in those, or have done previously. Less so in IndyCar, but you've at least seen them. And I think it just needs to be taken up a level now, and more visibility on those, because I think a lot of the time, especially in rallying, there are a lot of women in there, but you just would not know it if you didn't follow it. Even as a casual fan, you just kind of like, oh, is that really? And like, yeah, it's like every time I interview someone, like, Jesus, for every one, there's another 10 somehow that I've not seen before. And it's like, how am I going to get through them all at this rate? I know it's not my job, but at the same time, you kind of think, well, it could be a lot of interesting stories in here, and it's a shame that not more people are taking interest there. And as we touched on a bit earlier, F2, F3, and FREC have a lot of work to do on that front. I mean, Sophia is kind of on her own doing a lot of the work there. Tatiana had a bit of time in F2. She came back briefly, but was given a crap car. So obviously, as soon as she didn't do too well, everyone thought, well, we gave her a chance. And like, well, no, because while it is equal machinery, the setups and everything are very different, and you're throwing her in there when she's been used to IndyCar, what have you. So it's all these kind of bullshit excuses that they're trying to make for getting rid of her. Like, you wouldn't do that if it was a bug. And Frecker, it's one of those things because yes, I know that they're all very competitive, but what isn't at the end of the day? And I think going back to Sophia just one last time, if you're PHM and you've scored no points in 2023 in Formula 2, why not take the chance on her? Because worst case scenario, you don't score any points again, with her at least, but you can be seen as giving her a chance, and you can say, well, we did our bit, up to the teams to do their bit. And if she does score you a shit ton of points, she scored you a shit ton of points, and you're not going to be last in the championship probably. So what is there to lose?
She's got 1 point to be doing better. So, come on, give her the
exactly.
chance.
It'd be like Kimi at Lotus, who's just like, return on points percentage bankrupt the team. And I think just echo what you were saying earlier, F1 Academy is good, but it's frustrating that we need to begin with, especially when I think it could have thrived better alongside W Series as well. And people that get annoyed at it still boggle my mind because you just, I don't know how they're that narrow-minded with these things.
I mean, no one's forcing you to watch at the end of the day, so,
Well, exactly.
Yeah, but I wish we could force people to watch it. Like, I would want to put a gun at their head. Watch women racing, please. Like,
there's the next clip of the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of that does lead us into some questions and comments that we did get for this podcast from you, the listener. And I feel like, Öykü, you had the first one of these, so I'm going to hand it back over to you. It seems like something that came from you anyway.
Yeah, it is. So someone asked, if Susie Wolff was a male, would they be under the same investigation, or was this really a move of misogyny? Thiemo, do you want to give a background on what this is about, the misogyny thing? And all
you
that?
read my mind completely there. Just so in sync, we love it. And essentially we had the news beginning of the week. It feels like it's been a long week that for reasons that we're still not entirely sure of, Susie Wolff was being investigated by the FIA for, again, we're not entirely sure what. It was just kind of putting into question her role and involving Toto, and that they were passing information to each other that they really shouldn't be doing. But they were only notified when everyone else was notified, which seems a bit of a curious thing, shall we say. And we didn't know who was accusing them. We didn't know why. We didn't know at least a crumb of the evidence that was, because again, you'd think if you're going to accuse someone of something, you'd at least have literally anything to substantiate your claims, because that's usually how this works. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but at the same time, I feel like I could be at this point because it seems to be getting easier and easier. All the lawyers jumping at me in the comments now, and all the other F1 teams were like, we didn't do this, we stand with Susie Wolff. They all copy and pasted the same exact message, but at least they did something. And then it came out that the whole investigation was dropped, and Susie's like, well, what the fuck was that all about then? Not a direct quote, I'm just paraphrasing. But that was kind of all of us there sitting thinking, well, that was all a good waste of time. And you've got a bit of PR in the off season when F1's not being paid attention to as much, but not a good kind of PR. And I know that there's no such thing as bad publicity, but there kind of is in some circumstances, it feels like. And it was just very odd. And you're right, it does feel like if this was a bloke, would they be doing that? And it's a fair question to ask, because you just can't see it happening before then, because you'd think if that was the case, they'd be like, well, even if it got that far, like, well, where's if you were like the people behind the scenes, so what's your evidence? What are you doing? Da 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 da. Whereas this more like, oh yeah, we should look into that. Why? What have they? How have they managed to convince you?
Because they love each other and they share secrets. Like, I don't know. So I think Susie Wolff, she's such a strong figure in motorsport.
She lived up to her name.
Yeah, definitely. And there are so many things to question about what happened this week, because when they brought Susie into the Formula One management, the couple was married already. So you've been new. Is it only occurring now?
And they probably had to pass some kind of tests or checks to make sure that this isn't going to be a conflict of interest or anything.
Yeah. And they've been doing this for a while now. in the motorsports industry, and they're super professional, both Toto and Susie. And I don't take them for people who would be sitting at a dinner table sharing like confidential secrets with each other. Why would they? I don't know. And after the FIA has dropped the charges, Susie just shared a statement saying, like, this is it. This is all you gotta say. And it was so right. It was so rude and I think really degrading in a way.
Everyone's just standing there like that. What is it? It's not a. It's that Lima meme of just with the arms out, just going, "What the hell was this about?" Like, everyone's still very confused, and
yeah,
you can say, "What did you achieve here?" It's square root of sod all, basically.
Yeah, and it started all these rumors about F1 teams now wanting to leave FIA with Liberty Media and So we'll see what's happening. Nothing's going to come out of it, obviously, but still, it's funny to read about all these stuff that is being written.
It was just a classic week, I think, in F1 2023, whereby not much is actually happening, but let's make it seem like a lot is happening because this season has been utterly boring and pretty shit. Very, very, upsetting to read some of the stuff. It was quite confusing, more actually than anything else. I didn't really understand all of it. It was like, here's something and let's run with it, but we don't know where it's come from. It must have come.
Initially, you were thinking, oh, they wouldn't just announce this if they didn't have something there. So you're unsure of whether or not you should be sharing the support for it. And you're like, and then you get like past 2 hours of it, like, oh, so they don't actually have anything. Right.
No,
so what the fuck?
Someone has told them somewhere that someone's been sharing secrets, like they were in the playground at school. I mean, it was all very playground stuff. It was ridiculous from the FIA really to come out with some of the stuff they did without any real evidence. Someone's obviously passing something somewhere. I don't think they would make it up, but that's another point for another day. But it's just not a great week, really, was it? They've had a really, really bad week PR. And as you said, Thiemo, I was always told in lectures that there is no bad PR, but this hasn't really come off well for F1 and certainly the FIA.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives them a necessary challenge of having to try and spin this in a positive way for themselves. And whoever's job that is, I'm not jealous of them because good luck to you. You're going to need it.
So next question. We already talked about it a little bit, but still, somebody asked, why are there no women drivers in Formula E? And I think that comes from the fact that we have half of the grid women in Extreme E. So there is this understanding, which can be true, that electric series are more likely to have women drivers, not just technical wise, but also because they stand for sustainability and equality, they are more grounded on that level of things. So I feel like they should be at least more likely to have female drivers, and I would love to see some females on the Formula E grid, but I don't know why we still don't have any, honestly.
No, I agree, and it's curious because women there's women out there who I think you can last longer in Formula E than you can in other single-seater sports, just because of the age isn't as much of a factor there. Yeah. And you'd love to kind of see women like Alice Powell, Vicky Piria, who she's driven Formula E cars many times over different generations, and Sarah Moore, I'd say, in Formula E. And I mean, we had the pre-season testing, I think, not too long ago, and Gabriela Jorkova just tested for one of the teams in there as well. So it's like, well, come on then, you've got the test. And again, there are a few drivers, and Jacob and I know exactly who I mean when I say this, that would be like, well, I'm not sure how you got... Why not? Why not? We're not going to be best friends at any point. I don't think so. There's a couple of drivers where you're like, I can see how you got there, but I don't see how that's necessarily in the best interest of the team when, again, at the very least, which I know we shouldn't be always going back to this, but at the very least from a PR perspective, there's so much more potential here than if you went for X and X driver. And I'll start the naming then, will I, Jake? I'll go middle. I don't see how Dan Ticktum's still there and what he actually brings to the team, especially with his background. Idea. And you think Alice Powell, she's got a wealth of experience on and off track. Not just anyone coaches Abby Pulling. Vicky Piria, again, experienced driver in different categories. We'll just be able to see Sarah Moore. She's doing some single-seater stuff over in India at the moment. And Kerry talk about, she bloody tested for you. At least give them a practice session.
Yeah. I don't. It's a real shame for me as well, because there are more seats in Formula E than there are in Formula One.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly, comes across as a more sustainable championship, which will incorporate all things, not just sustainability with the electric side and no fuels, but sustainability from a cultural point of view, from other things as well, from an integration point of view. And Thiemo, you'll probably know more than me on this one. When was the last time we had a Formula E driver? Because I can't really remember one. Or how long has it been?
Since we had a Formula E driver, you mean like a woman in the car, or?
Yeah. A female Formula E driver.
I was going to say it's about 3 months ago. I'm not sure, to be honest. I feel like we've had. I want to say we've had someone in the car for more than a practice session, but I can't think who it was now off the top of my head. There was Simona de Silvestro, I think it was. Maybe.
Yeah.
Because I know she was in IndyCar, and I feel like we've had 10 years of Formula E now. I think she was in there. She maybe got a couple of races under her belt, and I think Tatiana might have had a go in there as well. But again, this would not have been. I've been watching Formula E on and off, but I've been into it the last 2 or 3 years for every race, more or less, and we've not had anything then outside of a testing session, as far as I'm aware.
No, and
so.
Not good enough, I think, is what I'm trying to say here. I certainly can't remember. Sylvester maybe rings a bell, like you said, but and if they can't get to Formula One at the moment, then Formula E is a growing championship. It's now got world championship status for the last 2 years. It hasn't previously had that, and it is.
That's a good excuse for them to try and get one up on Formula One. I mean, we saw what they all tweeted when F1 was in Vegas, and that was just very tongue-in-cheek about them, and we did love that. So, now do it with this.
I love that. Absolutely love that. It's always great to get one over on Formula One at some point. And there is the opportunity to do it. And as we saw with Jake Dennis this year, for example, he won the championship. There are opportunities that teams might think, actually, look, we might give you a test, even if it is just at the moment, it's very small opportunities, but like an E1 session, which will at the moment sadly be a positive. Obviously, we need it to be a lot more than that. But once again, I'll come back to seeing is being it. If you can see it, you can be it. And Formula E going behind a paywall this weekend, I don't know if it will help things from getting women involved on that front and then moving forward through the ranks maybe. But it's certainly one that has surprised me. I'm surprised that we haven't had one before. It's certainly one that we can't remember. And I'd like to think that would be before 2035 that we'd have a full-time Formula E female driver on the grid.
One last thing I'll say on that is that because you see teams in different categories these days, Andretti being the key one that comes to mind there. I know that Clara Anderson's not going to be with Act in Extreme E next year, possibly to focus more on rallycross, but Act do have a Formula E team, and it wouldn't be surprising that if she had the time, maybe she could at least get practice session or something there. You see these relationships forming between championships because of teams existing in multiple ones. So even if she got a seat in a different team in Extreme E next year, there's no reason why Act couldn't give her a chance there, for example. And again, you get to see and test out, because if you look at Leah Block, she's getting to do just about everything. And why should she be the only one? It's a good way to open that door and give other people that chance to do it. And I think as well, Andretti, they've got Katie Munnings. They don't look like they're going to be parting with her anytime soon, which I probably shouldn't have said because I've jinxed her and I apologise now. But again, Andretti, they've got their Formula E team. They've got other teams in other championships. Why not go for a test session or a practice session or something there? So I think the bottom line on this question is there really isn't a good excuse.
No, like there is I'd say for many of the different questions that we're posing at these various motorsports, there is no good excuse. And I think the sooner they stop looking for these excuses and start doing something, the better. But that leads us on to our final question for today. And one audience member wrote into us to say, despite the fact that they're working in motorsport, they still don't get taken seriously at times, both inside and outside of work. And there were some opinions and some things they've shared as well. You do this because you want to be a wag. Now, I don't know about you guys, but this is really kind of concerning to read, really. They're in it because they are a talented. They're adding something to the line of work, and these opinions are ones that don't really surprise me. I've been looking through various different social media sites, gaining response on Twitter, seeing what people are saying out there. And there was a thing last night as well, which is related to this. F1 showed their season review, and someone wrote in the comment section on Sky, well, I'm not going to watch that because that Naomi shift's on there and that will send me to sleep, Z. And these opinions, sadly, are everywhere. It's really sad to see. Another one, the opinions shared, you just find the drivers hot. And sadly, I have seen that as well on TikTok and other things. We see loads of different great content creators. I think TikTok's a really good place if you want to share motorsport content on there. Some really good snippets of podcasts on there. Some young girls on there and some females that really, really know their stuff. And it's really pleasing to see they've gone away, they've learned their history. And, questioning if she understands cars because she's a woman, which, again, really upsets me. I don't know what you guys think about this, but for me, this is, I'll use the word disgusting.
You gave me a nice segue there because, Öykü, I've noticed something about you. You're a woman, so have you experienced this?
Thank you for this amazing realization, first of all. Okay, so I have a lot to say about it. The first thing is, it's not just the audience that does that. Even people within the sport is supporting these claims. Christian Horner once said in an interview, F1 is bringing in a lot of young girls because of all these great-looking young drivers. How can you make such a statement? And I have one single question for you, which I think is very, very valid. If I wanted to thirst over good-looking, hot guys, why on earth would I pick a sport where these great-looking drivers are wearing a helmet for 2 hours straight and I don't see it? Like, not to mention that their bodies are covered from tip to toe. Like, why would I?
I'm saying the only way you're getting anything interesting there is Bottas and his calendar. You're not going to get anything else aside from that, are you? But even then, you didn't have that a few years ago, so I don't know what your excuse back then was.
I just don't understand. And when I was doing only journalism, I didn't feel the effects of misogyny in motorsports. That was just an icon at the bottom of the screen, and no one really cares, honestly, which is okay. But since I started making TikToks, some of the comments I've been getting are just truly shocking. So many men telling me to shut my mouth and go back to the kitchen. Like, what do you mean? They get really, really aggressive.
You should start recording them from the kitchen.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just cook and talk, right? That kind of videos.
Kitchen chat.
Good idea. Yeah, kitchen pod. Yeah, no. I think the main thing is they are threatened by women in motorsports, because why else would you get that aggressive? Why would you be in just completely in attack mode? Because you feel like you're in danger. Like, you should feel like you're being threatened to get that aggressive. I don't see any other logical explanation to that. And I am here for it, honestly. If a man gets so scared by a woman talking about car on a TikTok video, okay, I'm just sad for you, Yeah, I don't know. Just tell me to shut.
It's frustrating because it's just such 2D backwards thinking, and you hear stuff all the time, and it's like, it's not about being woke or any of that nonsense, It's just about you being a narrow-minded nincompoop. That's all it is. And like you say, if you're at the stage in life where this is your biggest concern in life, or if this is the thing that is most threatening you, then you must have a pretty nice life overall, if this is the stuff you can afford to focus on. And I kind of want to know how it's going in the rest of your life. But it's just, again, it's I keep saying frustrating, but it is, because other women in the industry that I know have also had to experience this too. And it seems that if you meet someone who hasn't had this, you're like, are you sure? Because it's probably going to come, and you're kind of half laughing about it, because it's like, if you don't laugh about it, you'll cry about it, and that's not going to help anyone either. And it's just sad, because it's, again, you'd think that it's just very backwards, and it's just, we could easily go off on a long rant about all of it, but it's just, there's no point to it. It's not going to magically make you all stop anyway. So, fair enough if you knew nothing of what you were talking about and you were making stuff up as you go along, which sounds familiar to a different podcast, Jacob, doesn't it? What was something with a pit stop, I seem to recall? Yes. So it's like, but no, you don't hear anything on that one, do you? If they were women, they would get so much shit for it, but oh, it's two blokes doing it and it's funny. So it's this kind of nonsense on that side of things. So it's annoying that you've had to go through that, and it's annoying that they still think it's okay, because I think that's one of the downsides of social media, is that a lot of people say a bunch of stuff that they wouldn't. You think they probably wouldn't say to your face, and if they did, there'd be a lot of black eyes out there, and you'd have a very long criminal record by now.
Yeah.
No, they wouldn't say it to your face at all, and that's the sad thing. A lot of them hide behind blank profile pictures and user 357892781.
Exactly. Yeah.
They never show themselves. Yeah, no, it's really it's. I've seen it for years, and it's a real shame. And I think it continues to happen. If you talk in that manner, then really motorsport's not for you. Because for me, motorsport is a very, and hopefully will become even more inclusive, but there's certainly loads of series out there. There's something for everyone. There's something for everyone in all walks of life. There are different motorsports with different interests. And if you're talking about it that way, then I'd say go and find something else to do with your time.
But to channel The Sopranos, get the fuck out of here. There's no place for you. We'll leave it on a more positive note, though, because we are going to talk about a more beat note, and that is which woman stood out for us in 2023. Now, okay, I'm going to come back to you because we've got two people each, one for on track and one for off, and lead us away.
Okay, so my on-track pick is Leah Block. She won her first rally championship this year, making her the youngest in series history. And she signed for F1 Academy with Williams, so I'm really excited to see what she will achieve next season. And my off-track pick is Bianca Bustamante. And yes, I know her main thing is to be on track, but it wasn't her driving that impressed me this season. I don't think she's such a groundbreaking driver when it comes to racing, but she's really, really shaking things up. Like her collab with Anastasia Beverly Hills in Macau Grand Prix, it was truly a game changer. A makeup brand stepping into the male-dominated world of motorsports.
It first time, I think, wasn't it?
It was, yes. Traditionally, big sponsors in racing are all about guys, yeah. But this partnership flips that script by saying, "Hey, you girlies, or like makeup lovers in general, you have a place here too. Like you belong here too." And she's a social media genius. Her TikTok game is on fire, especially with young girls looking up to her. She's so true to herself, both in being a woman, like she embraces her womanhood so well, and being a proud member of the Gen Z community. So I think she's like a guidebook for anyone trying to make a name for themselves. And I really like her for that. Yep, that's it.
With Leah Block as well, she's also going to be the first woman to compete in the Group E class in Nitrocross this weekend at time of recording. And maybe a little bit of encouragement by Uncle Travis Pastrana there, who obviously the whole Block family is pretty much racing in there. But it's nice to see that she's proven her, because she was in the lower class of the buggies, which is a lot of crazy fun, then moved up to the next class, which is kind of the feeder for that series, into the powerful Group E class in terms of power and just sheer chaos that comes with it. So it's going to be very interesting to see how she gets on. She already got her first podiums the last time out in the last round of Nitrocross, so it's nice to see that she's being rewarded to get that next opportunity. And with Bianca, yeah, she's really figured out how to play the game, and you've got to respect it, because obviously while being good on track is important, if you can really game the system a little bit off track as well, then it gives you potentially a bit more time that you would need as a driver. Because again, we say it's not a sport where you can just go and practice it anytime you want to on a track. It costs a lot of money. And if you can keep the sponsors and the fans happy all the time, then people are going to be more willing to give her a bit longer, which she's already a good driver, but maybe that's what she needs to then become a great driver. And so it's really nice to see those two kind of married together there and making that work for themselves. Jacob, who've you got?
So my on-track pick this year, actually, we move over to the World Endurance Championship. We've not spoken quite a lot about it, but it was the team of the Iron Dames of Team Sarah Bovey and Rahel Fry, who won the season-ending race in their class in the 8 Hours of Bahrain, which was, I think, the the first all-female victory in that series ever, which was just, for me, an absolutely fantastic story. They didn't just win it, but I think they dominated their class as well. They got close to the podium, I think, in Monza this year, or it might have been Spa, one of the earlier rounds, but it was just a really good story. And they've had a great trajectory, this team as well. They were set up, I think, in 2018, so 5 years in the making. They've come close on many occasions, and it's always very heartwarming and very good when a project put together to, rustle the feathers of the male-dominated world of motorsport, and they set out to win. That was their aim in 2018, and 5 years later, through hard work, progress, and determination, they managed to achieve their goal. So a very, 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 very good story, very heartwarming, feel-good story there.
And I think there as well, because of the category that they were competing in the World Endurance Championship, I think that's officially done now. They're redigging a few bits for the next season, so they get the last win in that category in history, which is also just a nice little thing to have to flourish on at the end of the year. So that's also fun. And I think as well, the fact that we didn't talk about them up to this point is because they've kind of done what we've been wanting everyone else to do, which is it just feels normal that they're there. We just kind of accept them as being there. It's like, oh yeah, it's kind of not that you forgot they were women, but it was just like, oh yeah, they are actually breaking a lot of ground, and you're basing it more on performance rather than focusing on the fact that they're women. You're kind of like, yeah, that's how it's supposed to be.
And it's also good that this was, action that we can see. There's been so many promises that we've talked about on this podcast, and you've seen press in the media. And it was just good that, that talk came to fruition through action, and then that was realistic, tangible progress that we saw on track rather than just online or on TV that we hear about, or, maybe this might happen by 2030 or whatever. This was, actual stuff that we could witness, and it was just fantastic. So off track, moving on to my off-track pick, someone that I've mentioned before on this podcast. And as Öykü already mentioned, a shame that we didn't see her on the podium, but I've gone for Hannah Schmidt. One of the unsung heroes, I'd say, not just from Red Bull success in the last 2 to 3 years when they've won championships, but before that, I can think of a number of good strategies that she conjured up in the days where Red Bull weren't as successful as the likes of Mercedes, even potentially Ferrari, going back to the sort of mid 2015 onwards sort of period. There was one strategy she put together in Brazil, which led Max Verstappen to win that crazy 2019 race, where look, for all the world that Ferrari, before they came together, would have had the upper hand there. And there's various other strategies as well. In the early days of Verstappen, where Verstappen was the underdog. Can you believe Verstappen being the underdog? But she hasn't been celebrated enough as, sort of Adrian Newey has, Christian Horner has, Gianpiero Lambiase, the drivers themselves, and all the various other Red Bull crew. And it surprised me to learn when I've been doing my research for this podcast this week that she has been at Red Bull and on the pit wall for 15 years, which pretty much is all of Red Bull's history. I think they've been around 17 years. So it's great that she was given a chance very early on. She was actually the pioneer of females on the pit wall before the likes of Ruth Buscombe and Bernie Collins. And so she's a real sort of, as I say, pioneer in that front. And hopefully, as the years go on, we'll see more teams as well put females on a pit wall because, she has done a fantastic job. And if she was there 15 years ago, that means she would have had a hand in some of Sebastian Vettel's success as well, which I didn't realise. So, she hasn't been talked about enough this year, and she certainly played a massive part in all of Red Bull's successes over the years. So that is my off-track pick.
Sebastian Vettel there doing more for women in motorsport by naming his cars after women than Red Bull did on the podium for all of the season in their most dominant year in history. That's all I'm going to say. As for myself on track, I've gone for Samantha Tan because a bit like Bianca, she's figured out the off-track game as well. And while she's a brilliant talent on track, which is key and feels like something where she's only just getting started, she's really nailed this appeal to general fans and has a dedicated following and kind of getting this really nice balance there, and is just very, very likable as an individual. And I think you need that because it feels a little bit like Piastri did in Formula 3 or Irondings this year, or maybe even Arlene Kodalinski in Extremely back when it was first starting out, in that terms of there's a lot of potential here. And I hope we get to see the chance for it to flourish. And as we've seen with the 3 examples I've had there, Piastri, yes, Irondings winning, and Arlene Kodalinski has just won the Extreme title for this year. Spoilers if you didn't catch up on that yet. So it's nice to see that she's getting a little bit of everything, because you take a look at her social media, she just seems to be everywhere at once, and you can't quite figure out how she's managing to do it. You must think that she's got teleport figured out. But it's just, yeah, I think as well for endurance racing, it's weirdly a category that if you're not a dedicated fan as such, you may not be aware of a lot of it. So I think it's important that they keep making strides there and they get the recognition that they deserve for that. Off track, I've gone for someone who's been on this podcast, but I'm going to give them a shout out and hopefully embarrass them a little bit, in terms of Florencia Anderson, because she was always a fan of motorsport. And earlier this year, she essentially called out Fox Sports in Argentina for not having any female representation or perspective to shake things up a bit. So the guy in there who does the main stuff was like, shit, yeah, you're right. So they hired her just before Baku, and she's been doing it fun coverage since then. And she's been growing on social media. You could argue she's been inspiration for others in the region and elsewhere. And she just recently graduated uni too. So there's now the qualification of being an actual sports journalist, whilst also doing some work with Ford in the region. So it's just awesome to see all that playing out and seeing it the chances that she deserves. And again, shows what we echoed at the very start of this podcast, it feels like, of you kind of need to see it to believe it. And it was one of those messages where she was saying to me, like, yeah, I didn't actually expect anyone to reply. And if she hadn't sent this message and thought, oh, I've just got to try it, you never know what happens, and fully not expecting to get a job out of it. But look at what can happen if you just put in the bare minimum and just see what happens there.
Just shoot your shot.
So, with that in mind, that is all we've got time for on this edition of On the Kerbs Pub Chat, although we would love to know all of the women that you think deserve a shout out on track and off, and if there's a massive ton of them, then that will instigate a reel that I will probably do on Instagram, and we can stick that on TikTok as well somewhere, and then just see how long we can make. It'll be about a 5-minute long reel that'll have absolutely no views whatsoever, because no one's looking at a 5-minute reel and going, oh, I'm not watching that. But the sentiments will be there. Details of where you can find the three of us will be in the description to this episode, and let us know your thoughts on everything else in this episode in the comments as well. Thank you all for listening, and we'll be back soon with another episode.